So for our fleet update, Captain Josh Nolder will be presenting the data. Amongst many wonderful things about Captain Nolder, vehicles is one of his passions. So he has a wealth of knowledge, and feel free to ask any questions you have.
Hello, everybody. So I just put together a pretty short slide presentation here for you of the overall of our fleet status. We have about 600 vehicles. There's a mixture in there of patrol vehicles, administrative vehicles, specialty vehicles. The vast majority of those are assigned to individual officers. We also have some fleet cars, fleet within a fleet. Those are the cars that get used when somebody's main vehicle is down. That's roughly about 10% of the fleet. You can see about 47% of those have over 100,000 miles. That number, 100,000, is sort of an industry number that's used in police fleets. 10 years, 100,000 miles, you generally want to be looking at replacing vehicles. And I'll get into why here in a moment. You can see even 16% of our vehicles have over 150,000. We do actually have some vehicles over 200,000. 56% over 10 years, back to that 10-year 100,000. The reason that you sort of see at 10 years, 100,000 miles, vehicles being retired, typically sold off in auction to then recoup some cost and put back into the MOA fleet budget, is because they lose a lot of value past a certain amount of time, and they become a lot more expensive to maintain. And sort of one of the things you don't want to have in a fleet is where you're costing more to keep the vehicle on the street than what it originally cost you to purchase it. And we have several examples of where our fleet is costing 2-3 times as much as it cost to originally purchase that vehicle, just to try to maintain. We also have something in police, in the police culture that's starting we're starting to realize that this is an issue for our vehicles, and that's the idle time. Everybody's seen police vehicles at crash scenes or collisions or anywhere that we have to have the bright overhead lights on. The vehicle's running at that time. We have quite a bit of idle time, obviously, just in the nature of doing our jobs. Well, every hour of idle time is equivalent to 30 miles per hour, or 30 miles of wear and tear on that vehicle. That's directly from the industry, Ford, GM, and those. So you add that to the actual miles that were done to the vehicle. And the example I provide is a vehicle just a little over 100,000 miles. It has 7,100, almost 7,200 idle hours. That's equivalent to 325,000 miles of use. So you can see that the vehicles, they're driven hard, right? The jobs that these vehicles do is extremely tough on a police vehicle. Even though they're designed for that, they're really not that much different than the civilian version of a vehicle. They'll have slightly better coolers, brakes, suspension, but in general, those vehicles are seeing very hard life. Because of that, our officers are spending an inordinate amount of time trying to find a vehicle when their vehicle goes down, and that keeps them off the street. I asked about a month ago for some just firsthand accounts of officers. I've got some of those details and some photographs. I wanted them to tell me what things they deal with. And there's a lot of accounts of them spending time trying to find a vehicle to drive to be able to go do their job, or en route to a call to include code runs, and the vehicle failing and having to pull off on the side of the road, which is not anything that any of us want to see in the city of Anchorage. We're first responders. We need to be there first. So obviously there's safety concerns for the high mileage. The wear, I've got photos, and they're in the very title page, of exposed metal in the seats just from wear. I don't know the mileage for some of these that the officers provided me photographs. Some of these vehicles probably have quite a bit of mileage, but we have vehicles. We have a 2014 Interceptor Explorer driven by a patrol sergeant that's got over 200,000 miles. So not even 10 years old. And again, breakdowns while en route to medic assist. I'll have to look. I can't see beyond Mr. Soltz. No, thank you. Based upon replacing 10% of the fleet in any given year, this 10 years, 100,000 miles or so, we would be talking about replacing about 57 vehicles per year. Again, roughly 10% of the fleet every year. So every 10 years, you would see the fleet completely rotate out. Now, there's some mix in there. There's some administrative vehicles, some specialty vehicles. That's not on that time calculation because they quite honestly, they see very little use. For instance, an incident command vehicle, it comes out in training, or it comes out in really big call outs. We maintain those vehicles, or MOA fleet maintains those vehicles. That's not what we're talking about with the 10 years, 100,000 miles. We used to be on a 10-year, 120,000 mile with MOA fleet. And about 15 years ago, their budget was almost $5 million. It was $4.6 million for just capital expenditures, buying vehicles for the entire fleet, the whole MOA fleet, with some exceptions. Fire's different, solid waste services, they get their own vehicles separately. Out of that 4.6, it was cut to 2.3 about 15 years ago. What I'm told, I didn't experience this, but what I was told by fleet was that the promise that was coming back the following year. It's never come back. 15 years on, that 2.3 million is still the capital budget for the entire municipality, to include the APD vehicles we purchased from. Obviously, everybody's experienced that a dollar in 15 years ago is not what a dollar's worth, 15 years later. So our buying power has severely diminished, even beyond what it was when it was nearly $5 million 15 years ago. As a consequence, our fleet that was 10 years, 120,000 miles, there is no year, there is no mileage cap. We are just really running these vehicles as no other, we have no other choice. Their MOA fleet is keeping them running, but now they spend far more time trying to get vehicles up to be able to be used than just maintaining vehicles, just doing oil changes and doing the preventative maintenance. And I think we have, I think we have about 70 vehicles right now being waited to be worked on by MOA fleet. And it's just perpetuating itself. The more time they spend to try to get vehicles back on the road so the officers have them, is less time they have to do the maintenance. And so that vehicle gets more use. It gets longer and longer intervals between maintenance. And as vehicles get older, parts are no longer available. A lot of people don't know this, but the manufacturers are not required to make parts after 10 years. So we have a pretty healthy portion of our fleet is Chevy Impalas. Well, the radiator for a lot of these Impalas is no longer made, depending upon the year. So MOA fleet is having a very difficult time trying to source things like radiators. Many of these vehicles are on their second transmission, second engine, and you can see how that winds up costing more money than to just replace the vehicle. That's the situation that we're currently in. If you can go to the next slide, please. So it's sort of a thing known within policing that it's this 10 years, 100,000 miles. That's actually the top. I recently had the opportunity to go to Police Fleet Expo in New Orleans just a little over a couple of weeks ago. A lot of them are quite less than this. The recommendations from fleet consultants that were there presenting was 6 years, 80,000 miles for police patrol vehicles. I'm not saying that we go there, but obviously the cost is very expensive to do something. We're asking to get back to a 10-year, 100,000, sort of that cap. Just for reference, AST, Department of Public Safety, they're at 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5 years, depending upon the function of the vehicle, that vehicle's replaced. So you can see in comparison, and I mean, different types of policing, but as long distance as they go, we wind up doing a lot more wear and tear on starting and stopping, and a lot of quick starts and quick stops. So equally difficult on vehicles in different ways. Again, we lose less, or we recoup less money when we try to go to auction. Currently, we're not in a place where we can even auction vehicles. We don't have enough of them. So MOA is just pouring money and time and labor into keeping the vehicles on the road for the officers. But if it were to go to auction, there's not enough money to recoup to put back into their coffers. With a life cycle, and I can get into that in a moment in another slide, you recoup money when the earlier you get rid of the vehicle to then put back into its replacement. I think I covered most of that. We can go on to the next slide. So this is an Excel sheet I got from MOA Fleet. These are just the top 6 vehicles that I could grab based upon mileage. You can see the usage is the mileage there to the right. The maintenance cost is, up at the top, I have the cost of a 2009 Impala based on their records was about $27,000, and a 2012 Impala. And if you don't know this, The last number in an MOA vehicle denotes the year. So 5 out of 6 of those are 2009 Impalas, and there's that one in the middle that's a 12. So I have both costs there for you. You can see the maintenance cost is double and sometimes triple the original cost of these vehicles. And the hours, that's hours that are put on by the municipal fleet shops to maintain those vehicles. So you can see in a lot of these examples, they're doing 500, 600 hours worth of work poured into those vehicles also to keep them on the road. And you can see the mileage to the right. Now, we obviously have vehicles with less mileage than that, but again, to my earlier slide, it's nearly 50% of our vehicles are over 100,000 miles.